Hi, I'm Thomas Bowles, Prince William County Agricultural Extension Agent. Welcome to our video.
I have 11:02. I think we have most everyone has joined us. So Pat, I think if we're ready to get started, I think we can go ahead and move ahead. Thank you again so much for joining us and presenting on this important topic. We're very privileged to have you as a longtime master gardener to join us to present this.
Thank you very much. I've been looking forward to talking more about seeds. Um, just, let's see. It didn't work again. All right, let's try that. There we go. When I retired some years ago, I decided to spend about half of my time growing native plants and about half of my time on master gardener sorts of things. So that has actually worked out pretty well. And so you see in the left picture there, my backyard, well, a piece of my patio, probably December 1st, the previous December. And then you see some pictures on the right. I don't know if there we go. And all of those are the pots as they were yesterday. You can see at the one on the extreme right that there are two pots that haven't germinated yet. Well, maybe they will germinate and maybe they won't. We'll see. But the little one at the top is my pride and joy because I always like to grow a batch of milkweeds each year. So there you have it. So, oops. All right, this isn't going to work that way. Let's do it this way. There you see my garden. Well, my garden isn't much of a garden. It's more of a nursery. My backyard is my playground. And there you see what happens in the middle of the summer at various stages, starting on the left would be about a month from now on through the summer. So I've got too much stuff on my screen here. Hold on, I got to move something off here. Well, that's not working. Here we go. There we go. Now I can see what I have to talk about. Sorry about that. This is the plan for what we're going to talk about for the next however long it takes. I'm going to start with a small section talking about native plant propagation in general. Then I'm going to talk specifically about propagating native plants by seed. And then I'm going to talk about a few plants, I don't know, there may be 10 in there, that are really, really easy to start with seed. Then sources of seed is an interesting topic, and I will talk to you a little bit about how some people are preserving seeds and saving seeds and various things. And then Leslie asked me to talk a little bit about seed libraries because I hear that you all are thinking about starting or ramping up, if you already have it started, a native plant seed library. And I think that's very interesting. So I did a little bit of research and have some information. Most of it is on your handout, but we'll look at that a little bit today too. And we'll stop for a minute or two or however long it takes between each section in case you have any questions. All right, so I'm going to have to do it this way. And that's going to be a challenge. All right, so when we talk about plant propagation, we talk about it in two different categories, sexual propagation and asexual propagation. With sexual propagation, the plants reproduce seeds through their flowers. You know, the male and the female parts of the flowers get together and they produce seeds, and then we have the seeds and we know what to do with them. Spores are a little bit different. You know, the spores fall off the plants without having had sex first, so they still have to do that once they escape. Asexual propagation, on the other hand, is making clones. With sexual propagation, you get the genetic diversity that comes with all that cross-pollination naturally. With asexual propagation, when you do stem and leaf cuttings or root divisions or the like, you get a clone of the plant you started with. So there is no genetic diversity. Before we go on, I'd like to call your attention to this photograph that I posted here. Kelly Norris, author of a book called The New Naturalism, talks a lot about creating nice native spaces, and I highly recommend the book. So what do we need for propagation? Well, I just made a general list here, and those things in bold print are what we're going to need to do propagation by seeds. In my backyard nursery, I like to do most everything by seeds that I can, but there are some things that just reproduce better otherwise. And so I'm a bit of a nonsense gardener, and I like to use the most efficient way. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But of course you need seeds, and we'll talk later about where you can get seeds, and we'll talk about the containers, a variety of containers that you could use, and the media that you'll need. I like to wear those nitrile gloves because I find regular gardening gloves to be sort of inhibiting, sort of in the way. Of course, we won't need any rooting hormone or planting seeds. An appropriate place to put your seeds. Now, these seeds that you see in this photograph here, which looks like, you know, December in my yard again, it's a different year apparently from the one you saw earlier, but they're pretty much in full sunlight for the winter. And then once they start to germinate, I move them into the regular places, but they sit there all winter in that way. And over the winter, you don't need to water them, but as soon as they start to grow, you're going to have to water them regularly. I mean, regularly. They must not dry out for one day. Okay. Now, the best part of growing native plants is you don't need any greenhouse or any grow lights. When I joined Master Gardeners almost 25 years ago, my first project was simply plant propagation. And so I was growing tomatoes and all kinds of things. And I had a pop-up greenhouse in my backyard. And my greenhouse, it was just, you know, a cheap pop-up. So it began to fail about the same time I got interested in native plants. And I realized, wow, I don't need this. You also don't need grow lights because you're going to grow everything outside. Now, that's not to say you can't start your native plants inside with grow lights and fuss with them and all of that. Remember, I told you I'm a no-nonsense gardener, and I don't do that. Timing is important. When are you going to plant your seeds? I plant my seeds in the late fall, usually right after Thanksgiving, because the chance that they're going to get fooled and germinate in the fall is past by that time. Now, when you collect the seeds, you take them out of the natural process. You know, Mother Nature's got it all figured out. It drops the seeds and then they grow at the right time. When you collect them, you disrupt that process a little bit. So then you got to pay attention to when and where you plant them. I plant all of my perennials in the fall. Some of them do not need that overwinter cold, but some of them do. Some of them you can plant in the early spring. Quite often I discover something I didn't plant in the fall that I still want to plant. And if it's something that doesn't require cold dormancy, you know, I've been known to plant seeds right now. I've even planted seeds in June. But, you know, you take your chances there. In other propagation means, the cuttings are best in early spring, and divisions are best, of course, when the plant is not blooming. I always like to stop and take a look at the difference between plants in nature and plants in your garden as part of the general overview here. This plant is Rudbeckia fulgida, the orange coneflower. The one on the left is a picture taken in nature by USDA, and the one on the right is what Bluestone Perennials. Some of you may know Bluestone Perennials. It's a nursery in northeastern Ohio that's famous for perennials. And they've taken the same plant and given it a lot of extra water and fertilizer. And so you see, it almost looks like one of those bunchy chrysanthemums that you can get in the fall. I have to say my personal preference is the one on the left, but you may think otherwise. One other thing you got to think about in general with seeds is, what is the plant's lifespan? Are you planting annuals? Are you planting biennials or perennials? Now, I know probably a lot of you engaged in this seminar today prepare plants for plant sales. So this is even more important when you're doing that. The annuals, of course, grow bloom, and die in 1 year. You can collect seeds, but you don't have the plant later. So if you have a fall plant sale, you're not going to want to sell your annuals. You want to have your annuals ready for the first year. Then there are biennials. The biennials make the plant the first year, and I have a nice pic. The photograph on the bottom there is the evening primrose, and I have a nice photograph of the plant without a bloom a little later in this set of photos here. And so I'll show you that. It makes a really very attractive plant the first year. And so if you're preparing it for a plant sale, you can sell it the first year in the fall or the second year in the spring, and then it will bloom. So that's annuals and biennials. But perennials, of course, you plant them, they grow for a long period of time. Now, you can't assume that a perennial will grow forever. It just will grow for more than 1 or 2 years. And in return, there are some perennials that are identified as short-lived perennials, and there are some which, well, you probably, if you have them and want to get rid of them, you probably think you can't. One thing about perennials that you should remember is they're not likely to bloom the first year if you start them from seeds. I have quite a few perennials that don't even bloom the second year from seed. But by the third year, most all the perennials get around to blooming. And I see the note on here to remind me to say that most of the native plants in Virginia are perennials. Now, just one more thing in the general category here. I trust that all of you engaged here are aware of the Plant Virginia Natives series of books. And I think I've pictured the one for your county here. But there are different ones for different regions around the state. The one for the region where I'm sitting right now has 4 different flowers in columns across the front. And oh, this is my gang down here. And each of us has, you see down here in the bottom, you have a little logo with a hummingbird. Ours is a logo with a cardinal, and, you know, they're all different. So that's the introductory part that's just general before we get to seeds specifically. Did I get any questions?
Nope, there's none in the chat box.
All right, very good. So I'm assuming that you all know the difference between a monocot and a dicot, and how the seed germinates, and the seed always puts down the root radical first, and then with the dicot, the cotyledon, the 2 cotyledons separate and form that what looks like a leaf, but it really isn't. And then you can see here how the cotyledon separates, and that'll look like leaf. And then the plant comes out. This, once you get the first true leaves, is when you can think about transplanting. Maybe not immediately, but soon after. So I wanted to take a look at seed sizes. Now, this is, I believe this is a dime. These photographs are all taken from Prairie Moon Nursery. So if you want to go look at some more, they try to do this with every seed. But you look at that first one, is the cardinal flower, which all of us like to grow cardinal flowers because they're that beautiful red and the hummingbirds love them. But their seeds, if you have them in your hand and there's a slight gust of wind, they're gone because they are so tiny and so light. So you have to be very careful with those. The common evening primrose are a little bit bigger. And of course, the others. And here on the left, you have the common milkweed. Now, the common milkweed is disseminated by wind. So it has those little puffs attached to each of those seeds. So you see how these seeds, for the amount of area, are much lighter than some of the other seeds. They're very skinny, and they kind of have little wings even without the umbrella that goes with them. Notice in the next photo, the middle one, that is a grass, and the seeds are more elongated than the ones in the first frame. And then you look at the last one here, the silky dogwood. They had to shrink the size of the dime so that you could see the proportion. That's a very large seeds, and you can handle those very easily. But many of the native plants have really tiny seeds. So let's talk about planting them. So you got your seeds and you got to have a container to put them in so that you can put them in some soil and give them some water and let them germinate. The one in the top right is something you can buy in a store. There are a lot of varieties of these domed things where you can plant, and you know the trays come with divisions or not. They're different vendors have different kinds of things. The second one you can make your own domed thing with a with one of those, what do they call them? They call clamshell boxes that food often comes in. Now, if you're going to use one of those, be sure to punch holes in the bottom because drainage is very important. You don't want the seeds getting soggy. You want to water them every day so that they have their water, they have their moisture, but then you want to let them have plenty of drainage. The bottom on the right is something called soil blocking, which is very popular with a couple of people in my unit. I don't use that because, you see my method there in the center. But with the seed blocking, you make the blocks with this little machine out of the soil, and then there's a little hole in each block where you can stick the seed in. And then the seed, when it germinates, the root takes up and holds together that block of soil. What I do with these pots is it will grow full of, maybe 2 dozen, maybe 6 dozen little tiny plants, so that when I'm ready to transplant them, I have to take them out very, very carefully and separate them. You need to use a kind of soil that's lightweight and clean. And on your handout, I've given you a recipe from UNH for making your own. I do not make my own. I'm very lazy gardener in that respect, and I buy whatever is the cheapest organic potting soil I can find. And that's what I use. But some of you like to play with things like this. And so if you want to make your own, UNH has a recipe, and then you can find other recipes online. Just a word about planting depth. The literature says that you should plant a seed about 1.5 times its diameter deep into the soil. Generally, what I do generally is to fluff up the soil in the pot and then scatter the seeds around and then pat it down very gently and then sprinkle as much seed over the top as I think would make that 1.5 seed diameter. And the literature says that the monocots can go a little bit deeper. That would be your grasses and sedges and things like that. I love this picture on the right. It's from Minnesota, and it shows how when a seed begins to germinate, the very first thing that happens is that root radical goes down. So there are some out there on YouTube. There are some nice little videos, cartoons that you can use with children if you want to be talking about this. The subject of viability came up yesterday. It's not something that I concern myself with as I'm running my backyard nursery because, because I don't know how testing would affect what I do in any way. But if this is something that interests you, I remember when I was a child, that's many, many years ago, before farmers had to buy their seeds every year. Farmers saved their own seeds, and my dad would bring in a handful of beans and a handful of corn, and we'd wrap each of them in one of his handkerchiefs and put it in a saucer with some moisture and to see what the percentage of viability was so they'd know how heavy to plant the seed in the fields. Think back to the first seed photograph I put up there. The size of that cardinal flower seed is so small that I'm not quite certain how I would use that paper towel test that you might use with some other things like beans that you're going to put in your garden. I'm not sure how that would work. I do save some seeds, but I always use seeds that I've saved from the previous year. And I buy some seeds that are always packaged for that year. So I personally don't do viability tests on native plants. My philosophy is, and you can laugh if you want, but my philosophy is you plant a lot of stuff, something will grow. So that's about all the advice I have to offer you on viability. Now, if you're looking at planting some seeds that you saved 5 years ago, you're not going to expect the same percentage germination as if they were last year's seeds. On the other hand, a lot of seeds last a long time, and just because you have some old seeds doesn't mean that you should throw them away. Well, unless you want to. I mean, old seeds sometimes will surprise you. You know, there's a story about Abraham Lincoln. What is it? This was about 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago by now. They were doing some excavating in Illinois in a place where Abraham Lincoln had lived. It was an archaeological dig, and they were in the outhouse remains, and they dug up some tomato seeds from the outhouse remains. And so they planted them, and they grew. 150-year-old seeds grew. So, you know, don't discount their age as terminal. I mean, it might be, but maybe not. So you probably already know that the 4 things a seed needs to germinate is water, temperature, light, and oxygen. And that's just, you know, all the literature says the same thing, and we all know is true. You got to keep them watered while they're germinating. You know, if you've put your seeds in a flat or a pot and you're not ready for them to go yet, keep them dry because they won't germinate until they get wet. We'll talk about that in a minute. And you know that some seeds require different temperatures, and you know that from growing tomatoes and growing cabbage in your gardens. You know, some seeds like 80 degrees to germinate, some like 60 degrees to germinate. Light is not so important to the germination process, but it's important immediately, because if you don't have light, your seed is going to germinate and grow really tall looking for light, and then you're going to have a leggy plant that you may or may not be able to recapture. And of course, there needs to be some oxygen in the soil. That's why you can't have it soggy. So in Mother Nature, it all just works. Now, I like this word imbibition because that's what causes a seed to germinate. A seed will germinate when water gets inside. That's called imbibition. Okay. If a seed has a really thick seed coat, it takes a while for the water to get inside. And so you might want to help it along a little bit if you're, you know, depending on what your gardening schedule is. So we'll talk about imbibition just a little bit more. And the other thing is seed dormancy. Mother Nature has built in a process so that seeds know when it's time to grow. And some of them require triggers, like your milkweed needs that trigger of having been cold for a certain length of time before it will be allowed to grow. So there are some special treatments that you can do to help Mother Nature along if you wish to do that. So let's talk about aiding with imbibition. It's called scarification. You can injure the seed coat so that the water can get in a little bit faster. So one thing is soaking it in water or maybe not hot water, maybe warm water until it penetrates that seed coat. Or you can chip little holes in that seed coat. As a matter of fact, one of the professors over at Reynolds, one of the horticulture professors with a large seed, he actually drills a hole in the side so that the water can get in faster. But once the water gets inside the seed coat and gets into the cotyledon, that's when it breaks through the seed coat and begins the germination. You got to be really careful if you're going to use, like those 2 photographs at the bottom, chipping, because you got to be really careful not to chip off the bud. I've seen that happen before, and once you chip off the bud, well, forget it. You can use sandpaper or a file. Some people put seeds on sandpaper and just rub them back just to rough it up a little bit. You can use chemical means. I'm not going to recommend it. I don't do any of that myself, and I'm not going to recommend anything of that sort. But I put that word up there because that is a possibility. Okay, stratification. Now here's where you're going to help the seed break its dormancy. And it's called after ripening. Mother Nature does it naturally, of course. So I have a friend in the Northern Neck who loves to play with his milkweed seeds. And he has a certain length of time. He puts them in a mix of sand and potting soil, puts the seeds in that, puts in a little moisture, and then he puts it in his refrigerator for a certain length of time to imitate winter. Meanwhile, my seeds are all outside just doing winter. So we have this little competition, but you can do it. You can play with your seeds. If you forget to plant them in the fall and you discover in February that you want your milkweed to grow this year, then look at stratification as a possibility. So now we have seedlings. The two pots on the top photograph are what my pots look like in my backyard. Like I said, sometimes I get a dozen, sometimes I get 5 dozen in one pot. The bottom is a photograph I took off, well, it's from the University of New Hampshire, where they're growing seeds inside, starting them inside under a grow light. You can do that. One thing that's important with these tiny seeds is you've got to keep them wet, got to keep them moist, but at the same time, avoid wet feed. And light is really, really important with seedlings. Now, outside, they get sunlight, and it's the proper amount. You don't have to worry about it. But seriously, consider light, because that's very important at this stage. Well, any stage, but especially at this stage. Fertilizer. You know, I just had a question from somebody yesterday about, I'm transplanting, what kind of fertilizer should I use? And well, I wrote back and said, none, of course. Fertilizer, first of all, when the seed germinates, within the seed is enough food to get the plant a week or so into its germination stage. It doesn't need any fertilizer to germinate. The seed has its own food. So after the seeds have germinated for about a week or maybe 2 in these little pots, I sometimes add a little fertilizer. I do add a little fertilizer if I see that they're not continuing to grow. But you got to be very careful with fertilizer. And then when you transplant, take a look at that picture. That guy or woman or whoever is holding the plant by the leaf and the root. Okay, so when I take them out of the pots, I separate them at the root. I pull them apart at the root until there maybe is no more than 1 or 2 sticking together. And then I will take a hold of a leaf and pull it the rest of the way apart, and then transplant it by holding it by the leaf. You can touch the stems, you can touch, or I'm sorry, never touch the stems. You can touch the roots and you can touch the leaves, because the plant can grow more roots and the plant can grow more leaves. But if you bruise or break the stem, it's curtains for that plant. So please don't touch the stems when you're transplanting. Now, some of you will probably transplant directly into your gardens. In my nursery, I transplant into pots, because most of the plants leave my garden in pots. So that's where mine go. Again, when you transplant it, either into your garden or into a pot, no fertilizer. No fertilizer. Why is that? Because the fertilizer is going to make the tops grow. When you transplant a plant, what do you want to grow first? You want the roots to grow first. Now, you can use some fertilizers that have no nitrogen and that are specialized for root growth, but it's just as easy to let the roots do what they do for a week and then give them some fertilizer so that they can continue. As long as we're talking about starting things from seed, a lot of your plants in your garden are going to reseed naturally. And the one that I've put up here on the um, on the PowerPoint here is cutleaf coneflower. It reseeds all over my yard. I'm not sure how it gets all over my yard. The birds must carry it around. But I go around my yard in the spring and dig them up and put them in pots and share them with my friends. So don't discount the fact that you can be growing plants from seed without actually planting the seed yourself. Somebody else might be planting it for you. Okay, that's the end of that little piece. Did you get any questions? Did I confuse anybody?
Most of their questions are for people who didn't receive the handout because they registered through the EMG biweekly. Here's one.
Well,
So I'm sending the handout out. So there is one.
okay, let me, oh, okay. Let me
Go
tell
ahead.
you about the handout. The handout is simply the text that you see on this PowerPoint today with live links on some of the things. So there's nothing on the handout that I'm not talking about today other than the live links.
So we'll make sure everyone get that registered through or that just got the
Okay.
Zoom link,
Okay.
they're all sending me emails. That's cool. I can do that.
Okay. But you said there was a question?
Yes. So from Caitlin Weston, this is obviously a very new to gardening question, so anyone please feel free to answer. How do you add fertilizer once transplanted if it is not liquid fertilizer?
I generally use an organic fertilizer and I just sprinkle a little bit around the plant. You know, I buy it, it's sort of granular. Most fertilizers are either sort of a powder or granular. You can just sprinkle them around the plant, and then the next time you water it, it will start soaking in.
Another,
Some of these things are just too easy. You know, you think it's going to be a hard, complicated answer, but growing native plants is really, really easy.
Jeff asks, do you plant any of the tiny seeds on the surface?
Yes, when I'm planting in the little pots, I always put them on the surface and then I pat them a little bit. And if they're really, really tiny, I stop there. And if they have any size at all, I sprinkle a little bit of potting soil on top of that. So yeah, you got to be careful not to plant the seeds too deep.
And then Kelly asked, when spreading seeds direct sow, what can you do to spread them evenly? When they're small, I end up not being able to spread them very far. They all clump together. Can you add sand or something so they spread? It's more to spread.
Sure, you can. That's an interesting question. I sometimes pour them into my left hand and then pick them up, you know, a little bit bunch by little bunch and sprinkle them. Most of the time I've been doing this for a long time, so you know, you have to work up to this. Sometimes if I look at what's in the seed packet, I can shake them and sprinkle them evenly around, but you know, you're not going to do that evenly. I promise you, you're not going to do that evenly the first time you try it. But that's generally what I do. If it looks like I'm going to have trouble, like I said, I do put them in my in my left hand, and pick up a few and sprinkle on this side and pick up a few and sprinkle on that side. And so that is probably the best way to get them even.
And then Shirley asks, how do you plant acorns?
I don't know. I guess just stick them in the ground and wait till they grow. I don't know. The squirrels plant a lot of them around here and they seem to grow. I, I don't grow. Acorns are a funny thing. You know, the insects get a lot of them before they fall off the trees. And you know, not every acorn you're going to pick up off the ground is viable. And there's a place where you might like to test for viability. Acorns if you put a bunch of acorns in a glass of water, the ones that are viable will sink to the bottom. The ones that float, some insects have already been in there eating the good stuff.
The next question is,
What is this one question?
there's a lot of questions now.
Okay.
Is light elongation like when the plant stem gets too tall and starts bending, chasing the light source?
Once you've got that kind of elongation, there's not much you can do to save that plant. See, that's a problem that I don't have because I grow all of mine outside. I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Someone,
I see that someone
needs
is
to
talking,
mute.
but I'm not hearing you.
I think someone needs to maybe mute their,
Oh, okay.
do you want to go on with a couple more questions or do you want
Sure.
to wait?
Sure.
Okay, so how do you handle squirrels eating the tops off your seedlings? Wait until they're larger. I've got that problem.
You know, I have a lot of squirrels running around here. I mean, I have trouble with a groundhog doing that every now and then, but I don't know the answer to that question. I sometimes use that deer away stuff that is what is it, garlic and egg? It's stinky stuff to keep some critters out, but you know, if you're going to grow a lot of plants, you're going to be sacrificing some.
Yeah. I think that was the last one.
Oh, all right. So it says we're going to look at some seeds that are easy to start. Now, this is to me, this is the fun part. Whoops, they're not ready. I got to find that. There it is. All right. My favorite one to talk about ease in growing is common yarrow. Now, the next few slides all have on the left a small plant and on the right a photograph of the bloom of the plant. And I think all the blooms are photographs taken from Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. And any photograph that's not identified as from a particular place is from there. You have a link to the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center on that handout. And I recommend, if you haven't already gotten familiar with that, wow, they have incredible information there. So with all of these, I've put some information below the photograph. All of that information also comes from the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. Common yarrow. I've been growing this for about 6 or 7 years, I suppose. And when I first got the seeds, this is a funny story, funny to me anyways, got the seeds and I planted them in one of those 12-inch pots one afternoon. And I confess it was later in the season, probably June, because I had decided late that I wanted to grow some and I thought, oh, well, I'll plant them. So I planted them in the afternoon, one afternoon, watered them and, you know, went about everything else. I came out the next morning and the top of that pot was like covered with green moss. Those seeds had germinated in less than 24 hours. Not only had they germinated in less than 24 hours, I thought I had 100 seeds and it looked like 1,000 plants. So that was one experience. Now you could also plant yarrow and get nothing. Conditions make a difference. I think because it was the middle of the summer and warm, they got that moisture. Imbibition occurred immediately because they're small seeds and they just germinated and popped right up because of the warmth. I'm guessing that's why they did that. I have never seen anything else germinate that fast, ever, ever. So the second one I want to mention is Monarda. There are several Monardas that are native in Virginia. I picked this one because it's probably the most plentiful. Wild bergamot. It will grow very easily from seed. And also, if you plant, you can see all those little stalks from seed on the left photo there. if you have one of those stalks in a pot 1 year and you keep it in the pot, or if it's in the ground, the same thing will happen. The next year there will still be several seeds there that have, or stalks there that have come from that one that was there. So then you'll be able to divide it. I grow most of my wild bergamot from seed because it's it's a very easy one to get ready for a fall plant sale by planting it in December and transplanting the seedlings in the spring, ready for fall. But also this year I have some in pots that I'm going to divide, and I don't need to grow quite so many from seed. There's your evening primrose. If you look, you see toward the top on both on the left and the right, there are two of the leaves of the evening primrose that are sort of turning red. That's what it does in the fall. And it really is quite a beautiful ground cover for its first year with all the color in the fall. And then you get the flower the second year. Remember, evening primrose is a biennial. But don't worry, it will reseed itself. And once you get it going, you will, some of them will get off the sequence. You won't just have them every other year. You will get off sequence and you will have them every year. So once you get these started, you will be growing plenty from seed, but you won't have to mess with the seeds. Goldenrod is another one that's very easy to start from seed. Do you know that there are over 30 species of goldenrod that are native to the state of Virginia? 42, somebody said. Okay. I don't know. I know there are over 30. But anyways, also is one of the really high value plants for insects, both as a source of pollen and nectar, and the plant as a place to nest. New England aster. Now there are a few asters again, I don't know how many, that are native to Virginia. They all grow very easily from seed, and the seed is very easy to get. New England aster is probably one of the most famous and most popular. My personal favorite is the smooth aster, simply because I like the foliage better. It has a very similar flower to this one, maybe just a tiny, tiny bit larger, but very similar flower. It's a little bluer maybe. And so all of these that I'm showing you are good pollinator plants. And this one I see attracts especially bumblebees. I like bumblebees. Cutleaf coneflower, I've already mentioned this one. It's very easy to grow from seed. And if you're a beginner, think about this one, or maybe the yarrow, or the evening primrose, because they're very, very, very easy. They will grow. They will grow from seed. If you've got some, it will grow from seed. This one will reseed in your yard. You may wish you had fewer at some point. Lyre-leaf sage is another one. We're in my unit, Master Gardener unit, this is one of the plants that we're experimenting with as green mulch or ground cover, to growing it together with other native plants as the ground, rather than putting down mulch. We have planted some.
Hi, how are you? Neighborhood anyway, so I'm guessing they're many.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Well, anyways, we're using it as a ground cover, and this will reseed. The plant that you see on the left is an example. The plant may be more green, the plant may be more red, depending on where you've got it planted. It seems to me that the more sun it gets, the more red the foliage gets. But in the spring, like right now, it puts up this about a foot tall shoot with these beautiful flowers on the right, and they're very popular with the pollinators. I have never seen a hummingbird at mine, but the literature says that they attract hummingbirds. Columbine, probably you all have columbine in your yard. Again, it's easy to grow from seed. If you have a parent plant, you look the next year, you probably have some little ones growing around it. What else do we have? Butterfly weed, it grows pretty easily from seed. It doesn't transplant well after it's established in the garden because it has a deep taproot, but it's easy to transplant as long as you still have it in a pot. But again, it's pretty easy to grow from seed. Button bush, and I'm starting to move a little faster here because I see I'm running out of time. Button bush is a good one, and there are a few things that are more easily propagated other ways, by layering or cuttings. These are two that would be easy. I never plant seeds for these two, the coral honeysuckle or the stonecrop, because they're easier to propagate another way. And sometimes I plant seeds for blue-eyed grass, and I've already talked about wild bergamot growing well from seed. With something like winterberry, they grow very easily from seed, but there's a problem with that because winterberry is dioecious. That means we have male plants and female plants. And when you grow it from seed, you look at those plants and you don't know what you've got. It also is a colonizer. It pops up plants beside itself. When you have a female, it will pop up plants beside itself. And when you dig up one of those plants, you know you've got a clone, which is a female. And so that might not be best grown from seed. And I'm going to skip questions now so that I can talk a little bit about sources. And I am going to go real fast because I want to get to the end. I'm sorry I talked so long at the beginning, but well, here are the sorts of things that you find on some seed packets. You notice that this seed packet from Prairie Moon here, it doesn't have an awful lot of information on the seed packet, but if you go to their webpage, which is on the right side here, you have quite a lot of information. This one is identified as that short-lived perennial, and I can verify that that's true. Another seed company that I use is Sheffield's in upstate New York. And that's, again, the seed packet has a limited amount of information, but you go to their webpage, you can find out that according to their study, the common pawpaw seed has 91% germination rate. That's pretty good. And also, this is one of the most important things that this company gives you. It shows that this seed was collected in Maryland. Sometimes when you buy native seeds, you don't know where it's been collected. This is collected in Maryland. You know, it's right here in our area. And so that probably is a good thing. You can collect your own seeds. Now, I would caution you, if you collect seeds from your own property, you can watch the plant for a while. You can use all the plant ID tools that you have, and you can know exactly what you've got, and it's legal to collect from your own property, or you might do the same thing on a friend's property. Be careful of unknown sources. If somebody gives you some seeds and tells you what they are with no label on them, yeah, well, I don't know. But be sure it's legal. It's not legal to collect seeds from public lands and parks and all. So be sure that you're behaving in a legal way. And I will say that when you're collecting seeds for tomatoes and beans and things, you've got to plan ahead in a different way and isolate and be careful of hybrids and all. You don't have to worry about any of that with the native seeds because they're going to be out there doing what native seeds do, where native seeds do it. And that's all you need to know about selecting them. You do want to be sure to select them at the right time and select what appear to be viable seeds. You want to choose plants that are healthy plants. Don't collect seeds from a scraggly plant. And then, of course, you're going to dry them before you store them. So here's a graphic that shows a plant that's not quite ready to be harvested. And in the center, time to harvest seeds. And on the other end, too late. I heard a person in New England talking about collecting seeds once. She said, sometimes the seeds are almost ready and there's a storm or something coming along and you need to harvest them a few days before they're really ready. She says, in that case, don't harvest the seed, cut the plant because the energy that's still in the plant will finish the ripening that you need for the seed. Now, I haven't done that myself, but that sounded like really good advice to me. Be sure to dry them thoroughly before you package them. And you may or may not want to clean and sort them. I usually collect them 1 year and then use them right away. So mine mostly don't get into packages for storage for any length of time. And so I don't bother to sort out the chaff. I just, plant it all. label. You'll see every time the word label comes up that it's in capital letters. Somebody gave me a bag of seeds last week and told me what they were. I have that bag of seeds with no label on it, and I have no idea what they are. Fortunately, I remember who gave them to me, so I'll be able to track it. But do label your seeds, because if your memory is anything like mine, next week you're going to pick them up and say, where did I get these? Store in a nice, cool, dry place. Virginia is in the process of a pilot project where they're collecting native seeds with the plan to develop a huge native plant seed library. And they're going to be collecting them from native sources so that you'll know that the seed actually grew in Virginia. And then they're going to hire, well, I don't know how they're going to manage it, but they're going to engage growers to grow more seeds so that there will be producing a large amount of these seeds. And the Department of Wildlife Resources is involved in this project. As you can see from this slide at the bottom, there are 6 or 7 agencies involved in this project. But if we were in person today, I would have some of these to pass out to you. This is what the Virginia Wildlife Resources Agency has to pass out right now. They're giving them away right now, but I think they're planning to sell them. And this is what's in them. And I'm not going to take time to talk about what's in them because it's all in your handout. And also, if you go there, it will give you a lot of other information about the project. I'm going to skip this part on all these seed banks because it's all the references are on your handout, and you can read everything that I've read in preparation today, because I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about seed libraries. Do I need to stop for any questions before I do this? Okay, we're going to go on. Seed libraries. What is a seed library? Now, the only reason that I'm talking about this today is because y'all asked me to. So this is not in my wheelhouse, so I did a little research for you. And so on your handout, you're going to find some of the sources that I looked at. And, you know, how do you borrow seeds is a question that I start with. I mean, borrowing seeds to me is like borrowing a Kleenex. You know, I'm not sure how you do that. So but there are ways that you can work this so you return it. The Global Seed Library is something that you may want to check out. The link is on your handout. Why start a seed library? I found an interesting article in the March issue of the Almanac, and it talks a lot about building self-reliance, building community, and all sorts of good reasons to start a seed library. Yeah, food. And then I forget the reference for this set of how you do it, but it's on your handout. I think probably the most important thing about starting a seed library is, number one, to make it an educational project, and number two, to collaborate with other agencies that can be useful to you. And I want to mention, I'd hope to have some pictures from them by now, but I don't have that. Last Saturday, I heard the president of the New River Valley Master Gardeners Association speak a little bit about the seed library that they've started. Now, theirs is not a native seed library, but you know, all of you people who are doing seed libraries around the state need to be connected with each other and get ideas from each other. Well, probably no 2 of them will ever be alike. You know, ideas are good. So they're using an old card catalog. Because theirs is not a native plant library, they're getting their seeds from vendors and seed producers, the leftover from last year. Seed companies don't like to sell last year's products. They like to just dump them. And so they have been able to get them, I think without charge, though I can't verify that. And then they make them available to their patrons, 3 packets at a time, with no obligation to return any seeds. And the education promotion part of it happens through their plant clinics, where they give away free seeds with informational materials about their seed library, workshops where they give away seeds with information about their seed library, and then some kids programs where they package the seeds in a particular way. For example, one she mentioned is a pizza garden where they have a packet of tomato seeds, a packet of basil, and something else that they package as a pizza garden. So now, if you're going to be doing a seed library for natives, you know, the commercial seeds are not going to be as plentiful as those seeds, the tomatoes and carrots and things like that. So the first question is going to be, what is your source of your seeds? Can you trust the ID that people put on the seeds? And are your seeds going to be collected by your EMG volunteers? Are you going to have patrons engaged? I'm just thinking some questions out loud here. But then, of course, once you do vet the seeds and know what your sources of your seeds are, labeling is next. How are you going to label them? Yeah, are you going to print labels? Are you going to have somebody in charge of labels? And then the most important is, how do you distribute them? Are you going to give them away? Are you going to give them with a promise to return some of the next fall, or some other plan? I don't know. I'm really very curious about this whole seed library thing. And I hope that you will keep in touch with me and keep me informed so that I will know more about this next time we talk. And then I would just say to you, happy seed collecting, sowing, and blooming. Oh, I almost forgot. As a responsible master gardener, volunteer, I'm obligated to tell you about the next thing that's going on in my own unit. It's the Spring Garden Fest, a week from Saturday. It's a big festival. We have vendors and exhibits and music and kids programs and a set of classes. And the only thing that costs, everything is free except for the set of classes. And the registration deadline for that is this Friday. So you can go online up there in the large blue letters, gpmga.org. If this interests you. I think there are a few seats left in the classes. I can't verify that, but I think so. And with that, it is time to quit. I say thank you. And I will take any leftover questions and do my best.
There are a few questions.
Okay.
How do you germinate roses, oranges, and lemons?
I don't know. I assume that with the seeds, you do the same thing you do with a normal seed, but I don't grow anything of that sort. So I don't have any experience to rely on. I would say with a lemon, you've got a hard seed that's got to crack. So you might want to get back in that scarifying category. I don't know. I don't grow those kinds of things.
The next one was from Caitlin. She said her children loves native edible plants. Does anyone have suggestions on easy to start from seed native plants that are edible?
Well, elderberry comes to mind first off. That's one of my favorites. You know, that's a topic that interests me, and I haven't pursued very much because I've dealt in perennial flowers mostly. A lot of those things are probably edible, though.
Sandy would like to know, can I buy seeds and start them now for a plant sale next spring?
Yes. The short answer is yes, absolutely. If you're buying perennials and you plant them now, they're going to grow this year and then they'll die back during the winter. And a plant sale about this time next year, they will have reemerged and they will look great.
Good, how are you?
So there's, most of them are just saying thank you for
Oh,
this class. There are some suggestions about the germinating lemon seeds from a couple of the other people on the class.
well, you all know that lemon is not native to Virginia.
Yep.
Yeah. Hmm.
Is there a way to collect seeds from bluets?
From what?
That was from Valerie.
I'm sorry, I
Uh,
didn't
um,
hear from
It
what?
said, is there a way to collect seeds from bluets? Bluets.
Oh, that's a good question. And I have not grown bluets. I have bluets. Bluet seeds are really hard to get commercially too. So that would indicate to me that they might be hard to collect. I have not grown bluets from seed. I, and so,
That sounds like a question for Earth Songo, Valerie.
well, and that the fact that they're not available commercially though does indicate something, I think.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I have
Um,
a source for plants, but not for seeds.
Let's see, there was another
Someone
question.
had a question about wineberries. That plant is invasive.
Yes, how to transplant wine berries. That was one.
Wineberries?
Yeah.
Is that a Virginia native?
No, it's an
An
invasive
invasive.
plant.
That's an invasive, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, you probably might want to get rid of it instead of transplanting it.
There's also a question on coral honeysuckle. How much do you need to cut it back in the fall to promote new growth in the spring?
Well, I have known people that cut it back very, very vigorously. I deal mostly in new plants, so I I grow it from a cutting, and then in the fall, when I'm about to take it to the plant sale, I cut them all back and make new cuttings. I have to confess, I don't have one growing here on my property, but I've heard people say they can cut it back quite a lot. And you're going to want to cut out all the dead stuff, of course, which I don't know, that could be a challenge in itself. But I think you can cut it. It's a pretty vigorous grower. So I would think you could cut that back pretty much.
It doesn't take much pruning of that to make it grow more.
Yeah.
Mine grows wild, but it's because I'm growing it
Yeah.
as a safety spot for birds.
Yeah. 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 It is a very vigorous grower. So I would say that however you want to prune it is probably going to be okay.
Yes.
And that was the last question.
Well, thank you. Come back here and get my gang back, get my gang back in here.
Thanks for saying yes, Pat.
Saying yes to what?
To doing this talk.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. You made me do a little research. Actually, the seed banks that I didn't have time to talk about was an interesting piece of research too, because I found a lot of, besides the the Doomsday one over in Norway, I found quite a lot of other seed banks that
We're just getting off the ground. So
Yeah.
and it is with other organizations. So.
Well, and there are several. The San Diego Zoo and the Wildflower Center here in the U.S. both have native seed banks that they're going. I mean, there's some other seed banks in the U.S. too, but those two are specifically native. And then this one that's just getting started in Virginia, I think it's going to be quite a thing.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pat. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you all for joining us for this
Thank you.
Virginia Cooperative Extension Prince William Unit webinar. It was great to see everyone. I did want to give a shout out, like Leslie mentioned, to our partner, Prince William Soil and Water Conservation District, or really the one spearheading this idea of the seed libraries within our Prince William County libraries. So it is kind of in the very initial stages, but we're looking forward to being involved in this project. So it's very exciting. And this was such a great resource to think more about this process of how we're going to handle that.
Well, I'm really excited that you're going to do that and look forward to learning more about it. I think it's a great idea.
I'll let you know.
I'll bring you some things.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Take care, Carol.
Bye, Pat.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.